Hello ladies, welcome to Menopause University. On this channel I teach you everything you need to know in order to understand and utilize information that is pertinent to menopause in any way. In the last 9 videos I've been educating you on cancer in general. I have made sure you understand how cancer cells differ from normal cells, how cellular abnormalities become cancer, how to assess cancer, and what causes cancer. The only thing left to discuss is the difference between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers. Now, obviously, the words hereditary and non-hereditary indicate their difference at face value to some extent, but as usual, there's more to it than that. And the things that constitute the more to it than that are very useful and critical to your understanding cancer in general. So let's address the differences between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers in a way that will really give you a full understanding of the two. When it comes to topics like this that people think they understand already, I like to begin with a quiz question. A quiz question forces you to see what you don't know. It faces you with what you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know until you're made aware of the fact that you don't know it. So see if you can answer this quiz question. Which of the following is true regarding the difference between hereditary cancer and non-hereditary cancer? A. Hereditary cancer involves cell damage that begins before conception. Non-hereditary cancer involves cell damage that begins after conception. B. Hereditary cancer will always be passed to one's offspring. Non-hereditary cancer will not. C. Hereditary cancer affects all an individual's cells. Non-hereditary cancer affects only certain cells. D. Hereditary cancer is inevitable. Non-hereditary cancer is not. E. Hereditary cancer occurs at younger ages. Non-hereditary cancer occurs at older ages. F. Genetic testing exists for hereditary cancer, but not for non-hereditary cancer. G. All of the above. H. None of the above. I. A, C, and E above. J. B, D, and F above. Well, what's your answer? Do you know as much as you thought you knew? Here's the answer in bold. Now, rather than going through the quiz question itself, let's delve into these differences between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers. And I'll explain all these things that were part of the quiz answer options as we go. Any discussion of anything pertaining to heredity is really a discussion of genetics. Now, most people don't really like genetics, and very few really understand genetics. And I'm no geneticist, but I find genetics fascinating. And while I do need to give you a bit of background in genetics as a basis for our topic today, I'm going to make it really short and sweet for you. The most basic thing about genetics is your chromosomes. You have 23 in all, but each of the 23 is really a pair. You get one of the pair from your mom and the other of the pair from your dad. So here I have 2 scarves, okay? They represent 2 chromosomes, one from your mom and the other from your dad. Now notice that the colors are identical on the 2. So the 2 paired chromosomes match. The only exception to this rule is your sex chromosomes. And with your sex chromosomes, Females still have a pair, but males do not. That's why females are so much better than males. Females have 2 X chromosomes and males have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. But all your other chromosomes are a matched pair. Here's a picture of a set of chromosomes for a single individual person. While the colors are difficult to see, for each pair of chromosomes, the lavender one on the left came from mom, and the green one on the right came from dad. Notice that all the chromosomes seem to be a bit riveted, with light areas and dark areas. Those different areas represent genes, and genes carry all your genetic material. These strips of different colors on these scarves represent the genes. Each chromosome has the same set of genes as the other chromosome. For every physical characteristic, trait, tendency, and susceptibility, you get 1 gene from mom and 1 gene from dad. So for everything about you, you have a pair of genes that determine that particular trait. Now, when it comes to the difference between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers, the most basic difference between the two begins here, with your genes. With hereditary cancers, one of your parents has a mutation in one of the genes long before your conception. And they pass that mutated gene onto you in the set of 23 chromosomes that they donate to you. Using our scars, this would be like one of the 2 scars having a knot in it. So instead of 2 perfectly normal scars, you would have one chromosome like this and one like this. So one scarf is still normal, but the other bears a knot that represents a mutation in just one gene. So hereditary cancers begin before conception. The predisposition for these cancers is present before you ever come into existence. With non-hereditary cancers, neither of your parents has a mutation in any of the genes. So they do not pass on any mutations to you in the set of 23 that they donate to you. You start out just perfect. There is no predisposition to cancer before you're conceived. Any cancers you develop start after conception. So let's create a chart to fill in as we go along here. I think it helps you to remember the details that way. All you see here thus far is a simplified version of what we've just established. Hereditary cancers begin before conception, whereas non-hereditary cancers begin after conception. Now, the next big difference pertains to the damage to cells that results in cancer. You learned in earlier videos that normal cells have control mechanisms that keep the cells organized, regulate cell division, and limit the lifespan of the cells. So all the genes contained on both pairs of your 23 chromosomes have these control mechanisms built into them. If anything damages the genes, these control mechanisms can become wacky. And wacky cells can get out of control with regard to both disorganization and growth. When a cell is damaged beyond a certain point, the control mechanisms stop working and cancer can develop. You can think of the control mechanisms as stoplights. The stop signal causes the cell to put on the brakes and slow down so that control is maintained. Damage to cells can release the brakes and let the cell get out of control. That's like a green line. But the way in which this cellular damage occurs differs for hereditary and non-hereditary cancers. Damage to the genetic material in your cells occurs throughout your entire lifetime. All sorts of things serve to damage the genetic material in your cells. Toxins, chemicals, sunlight, trauma, etc. With hereditary cancers, one gene of the pair is already damaged. So you have this and this. And that pre-existing damage to that one gene makes it a whole lot easier for the damaged genetic material to reach the threshold that causes cancer. It's as if it has a head start on getting out of control. The other gene is normal, but all it takes is enough damage to that one other gene right here, matching this one, to release the brakes on all the control mechanisms that would normally prevent cancer. It's like any other aspect of your body for which you have just one anatomical part. So here, if you have both of the same genes damaged in both chromosomes, there's no normalcy. If you have one kidney that gets damaged, the other one can compensate to keep your overall kidney function normal. But if one of your kidneys is already non-functional, damage to your remaining kidney is a deal breaker. There's no compensation. You'd have to get a kidney transplant. With non-hereditary cancers, though, both genes of the pair are normal. There's no pre-existing damage. Everything looks normal on these two scars. So, in order to create enough genetic damage to release the brakes on the control mechanisms that normally prevent cancer, you have to damage both genes of the set. And most likely, damage to both genes of the set is not going to occur all at once. I mean, there might be a little damage here, and there might be a little damage there, and over time, you get damage. But only after multiple insults over a long period of time will there be enough genetic damage to constitute a mutation. So the fact that non-hereditary cancer does not involve already damaged genetic material means that it takes more episodes of damage to result in cancer. So if we reflect this on our chart, we get this. So now you see that the second difference between hereditary and non-hereditary cancer is that hereditary cancer has pre-existing damage in one gene and no damage in the other gene, whereas non-hereditary cancer has no pre-existing damage in either gene. Well, if the quantity of damage necessary to incite hereditary and non-hereditary cancers differs, then the time frames over which these cancers develop is different also. With hereditary cancer and the head start created by the already existing genetic mutation, it doesn't take a long time to damage the single gene that was preventing the cancer from developing. Since we endure genetic damage all the time, you could incur enough damage at a very young age. So this accounts for the fact that hereditary cancers occur at younger ages. If you start out with this, you're likely to end up with this much sooner. The head start sort of sets the stage for just a little bit of damage to result in cancer. But with non-hereditary cancers, the genetic material of a cell has to endure repeated episodes of damage in order to induce cancer. You might incur some damage in your 20s, and then you might incur some damage in your 30s, and then yet some damage in your 40s, and again in your 50s. But because you have to incur a lot of different episodes of damage, and because each episode of damage will occur over a long period of time, you aren't likely to get cancer until you're old. So this accounts for the age difference that is typical between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers. So here it is on our chart. You're more likely to get hereditary cancers when you're young, and you're more likely to get non-hereditary cancers when you're old. Now, another difference that you may not have considered between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers is the number of genes that are affected in these two types of cancers. With hereditary cancers, there is just one single gene that is affected. At first, it's affected on just one chromosome. But within a short time, it's affected on the other chromosome. But it's still just that one gene that's affected. So you start out with this and this. But if you end up with this and this, it's always still just the one single gene. So do you notice that the knots in these two scars are in the very same location? That's because with hereditary cancers, the genetic mutation is in the very same gene on both chromosomes. But with non-hereditary cancers, such is not the case. With non-hereditary cancers, the genetic damage affects many different genes. So, you might have a damage here and here. So you have two chromosomes with damage in different genes. Over time, you just end up with enough different kinds of damage to release the brakes on the control mechanisms that would have prevented cancer. So one gene controls one thing, another gene controls another thing, and yet another gene controls a third thing. But all together, all control is lost, and the result is cancer. So that's why the knots in these scarves are all in different locations. Or you might end up with this. It can happen in any genes on either of the chromosomes, but it's over time and it's different genes. Okay? With non-hereditary cancers, the genetic mutation is in different genes on the same chromosome, like this. So here that is on our chart. So now you see that hereditary cancers involve one single mutant gene, whereas non-hereditary cancers involve multiple mutant genes. The next big difference between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers is consideration of the number of cells that bear the mutant gene. In other words, is the mutation localized to one cell, or is it present in all cells? Now, I know that may sound confusing at first, but think about it. With hereditary cancers, you've got a genetic mutation that is present in all the cells of your body. Why? Because every cell of your body has your set of 23 chromosomes, one from mom and the other from dad. So every cell carries the mutation. But that is not the case with non-hereditary cancers. In non-hereditary cancers, there is repetitive genetic damage to many different genes in just one cell that ultimately becomes a cancer cell. I think this is a very important distinction, and most people don't really realize this. So here it is on our chart. So you see that for the number of cells carrying the mutation, in hereditary cancer, it's all your cells. Whereas with non-hereditary cancer, it's only one single cell. Now, closely related to the number of mutant cells is the number of organs that carry the mutant cell. For hereditary cancers, go back to the basic principle that every cell in your body carries the same set of 23 chromosomes. Well, all your organs are collections of your cells. So by default, if all the cells contain the genetic mutation, then all your organs can carry the genetic mutation. But with non-hereditary cancers, such is not the case. With non-hereditary cancers, one single cell in one single organ incurs enough genetic damage that it, and it alone, forms a cancer cell. So it involves only one organ. That's where it all begins. So let's add that to our chart. Here you see that all your organs carry the mutation with hereditary cancers, but only a single organ contains the mutation with non-hereditary cancers. See the difference? So, if you combine the cell number and the organ number, you see that hereditary cancers involve a single gene that is present in all cells and all organs of your body, while non-hereditary cancers involve multiple genes that are present in only one single cell of one organ of your body. It sounds like a mouthful, but it makes perfect sense. Next is the likelihood of passing the mutant gene on to your children. This differs greatly between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers. With hereditary cancers, you know that you inherit them. That's because you get 50% of your genes from your mom and 50% from your dad. So when you have children of your own, what happens? You donate one of your 2 sets of each of the 23 chromosomes to your child. If you carry a genetic mutation, it will be present on one of the pair, but you only donate one of the pair to your child. That means that your child has a 50% chance of inheriting your mutation. If these are my 2 chromosomes, I'm going to donate either this normal one or this mutant one to my child. One has the genetic mutation, the other does not. So my child has a 50% chance of getting the genetic mutation for a hereditary cancer, regardless of whether or not I've ever actually had the cancer. But with non-hereditary cancer, it's a whole different story. Neither of my chromosomes has a mutant gene. They're both perfectly normal. That's the big difference. So there is 0 chance that I'll donate a genetic mutation to my child, even if I've had the cancer. My cancer was due to repetitive cellular damage that occurred during my lifetime. It has not affected the genes I donate to my child. So here's our chart. So with hereditary cancers, you have a 50% chance of passing the mutation on to each of your children. Whereas with non-hereditary cancers, you have a 0% chance of passing it on to any of your children. The final difference to consider between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers is the differences in genetic testing between the 2. I think it's best to divide genetic testing into 2 different time frames. One is genetic testing before you get cancer. The other is genetic testing after after you get cancer. For hereditary genetic testing, hopefully you get tested before you get cancer. You are testing for increased hereditary susceptibility to the cancer. You want to determine if you have a mutant gene that you inherited from one of your parents. And such a gene would be present in all of your cells, in all of your organs. It would increase your risk of getting the cancer. And you would have a 50% chance of passing it on to each of your children. But non-hereditary genetic testing is different. With non-hereditary genetic testing, you get tested after you have the cancer. And instead of testing for a mutation that you inherited from your mom or dad, you are testing for the genetic features of the cancer itself. You want to determine the personality of your cancer so that you can make decisions about treatment and anticipate your prognosis. These mutant genes will only be present in the cancer cells in the one organ where the cancer began. And the genetic testing says nothing about your hereditary risk of getting that or any other kind of cancer. But it does help dictate treatment. This is the kind of testing women get to determine whether their breast cancer is hormone receptor positive or hormone receptor negative. So these two types of genetic testing serve two completely different purposes. And now we can complete our chart. So genetic testing for hereditary cancers is done before getting cancer. And it's done for purposes of determining your susceptibility for the cancer. Whereas genetic testing for non-hereditary cancers is done after getting cancer, and it's done for purposes of determining treatment and prognosis. Some people claim that all cancer is genetic. And there is definitely some truth in that due to the fact that all cancer involves damage to genetic material. But you've learned now that genetics are not the same as heredity. Heredity has to do with what you inherit from your parents. Genetic damage that results in cancer has to do with traumas and exposures that you endure during your lifetime. And I hope this is very clear to you now. Hereditary and non-hereditary cancers are quite different. So, did you already know everything about the differences between hereditary and non-hereditary cancers, or did you learn something here today? Do you see the many ways in which they differ? The chart is your summary, and you can find it as a link in the description box just below the screen or at my website, which is menopausetailor.me. The chart makes it really easy to see how the genetics for hereditary and non-hereditary cancers differ. But you should still go to menopausetailor.me to schedule a consultation about genetic or non-genetic matters. I'll help you with anything. You should also subscribe to my newsletter and to this YouTube channel. If social media is your thing, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And this is the end of our unit on cancer in general. I'll surprise you with something new next week. Bye!